He had a gun in his hand, pointed right at my wife, and she didn't flinch, didn't shout, didn't even blink. She just tilted her head and said, "You sure you want to do that, officer?" He had no idea who she was. No idea what she was capable of, and absolutely no clue that this woman, this calm, barefoot, dish towel holding woman standing on her own front porch was Sheriff Rebecca Monroe. That's when everything started unraveling for them. But it didn't begin with a gun. No, it began with a mailbox. 5 days. That's how long we'd lived in East Summit before the first violation showed up, bright orange. Taped to the front of our mailbox like some kind of middle school art project. Notice of non-compliance. Pink color out of regulation. Correct within 72 hours to avoid citation. I thought it was a joke. I honestly did. We hadn't even unpacked half the garage yet. I'd barely figured out how to work the smart thermostat. And now, I was standing there with my coffee going cold in my hand, staring at what looked like a warning label from a dystopian sitcom. Rebecca walked up beside me, still tying her hair. Beck saw the paper and raised one eyebrow. They don't like our mailbox. Apparently the hue is non-regulation. She scanned it, frowned. No contact info, no number, just a stamp. East Summit Neighborhood Safety Board. That sounds fake. It sounds like someone made it up 5 minutes before lunch. We both left, then tossed it on the counter. Didn't think much of it. Until the second notice came 2 days later, this time, slapped to the windshield of Rebecca's SUV. Vehicle violation, driveway parking obstruction fine. $1 to 5 repeat offenses may result in escalation. Her car wasn't blocking anything. Not a sidewalk, not a hydrant, just parked in our own driveway. I looked at her. She looked at me. Did we accidentally move into a gated community? I joked out. Rebecca didn't answer. She was already pulling up the real estate agreement on her laptop. Her fingers moved fast. I leaned over her shoulder. She didn't say a word, just scrolled, then stopped, highlighted a line. This property is not subject to any active homeowners association. I let out a slow, long whistle. So, who the hell are the East Summit Neighborhood Safety Board? Rebecca didn't respond. She saved the PDF with a new name, evidence_no_HOA.pdf. Still, I was half convinced it was just a cranky neighbor playing pretend. That changed the next morning. I was out front trimming the hedges when I noticed him, across the street, standing, dead still, holding a camera with a telephoto lens, a badge on his chest, a walkie clip to his belt. Something about him looked off, like a costume. His badge shone brightly. His boots looked unused. His belt, thin vinyl, the kind you'd see on Halloween. He saw me looking and started strutting over. Afternoon, he said, puffing his chest like a dollar store deputy. Sergeant Daniels, East Summit Neighborhood Safety Board. He flashed a laminated card. I squinted at it. Expiration, December 2021. It was 2025. We handle community compliance, he said. You've had a few violations already. We'll need to inspect your garage. I laughed. Yeah, that's not happening. He stiffened. Non-cooperation will be noted. Cool. You can note it from the sidewalk. I locked the door behind me. That night, Rebecca pulled up county land records and tax maps. She's methodical like that. Cross-referenced plots. Traced back land use permits. There's nothing. She said, no legal entity, no incorporation, no watch group, no taxes, no filings. So they're fake. They're worse. They're pretending to be real. She opened a blank Word doc and titled it, Board Watch Initial Report. I could already feel the storm building. They won't stop, I said. No, she replied. They think they've found sheep. She turned to me with that look I hadn't seen since her days in corruption task force. The look that said, they're walking straight into a trap and don't even know it. You get the cameras, she said. I'll start the log. By the next night, our house had 4 motion-activated cameras, hidden in the eaves, tucked in the mailbox post, even one disguised inside a decorative porch lantern. Rebecca printed every violation we'd gotten and Map them with dates on a whiteboard. We tracked the patterns, the times, the language. Day 4, he came back, Daniels, camera in hand, walking like he owned the place, snapping pictures. Measuring hedges. Then he left another orange slip. Final. Warning, non-compliant landscaping. Immediate correction required. We watched the footage 3 times. Slow motion. Pause. Zoom. His badge. A thin sheet of aluminum. Jeep. You could see our porch light reflecting off it. The radio on his belt. Not a police issue. It was a Baofeng, programmable. Unregistered, untraceable. Rebecca leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, eyes cold. He's not just faking horror authority, she said. He's impersonating law enforcement. That was a felony, and we had it on camera. It got worse before it got better. 2 days after the final warning, another man showed up. Not Daniels this time. Someone taller, sloppier. With sunglasses he didn't need and a clipboard he clutched like a badge. He didn't knock. He didn't say a word. Just stood at the edge of our lawn, trying to angle his phone camera through the fence slats toward our backyard. That's when it stopped being isolated. It was a pattern now. Organized, calculated. Rebecca stood beside me as we watched him from the living room. Her voice was quiet. They're not trying to enforce anything. They're trying to build a case. Something fake. Something they can use to scare people. Scare them into what? I asked. Into paying. Into obeying. Into shutting up. She was right, because later that night, we discovered something chilling. The violation letters weren't just being hand-delivered anymore. They were being mailed. Official-looking envelopes. Pre-printed return addresses. A Summit Neighborhood Safety Board. Poe Box 1172. Rebecca opened one slowly, like it might bite. Notice, willful obstruction of community harmonized code. East Summit 14.3 BTHE code didn't exist. Not in any county book. Not in any ordinance. Rebecca searched every legal archive. Nothing. It's fiction, she said, holding the paper up to the light. They're making it up. So we pushed back, quietly, methodically. Every camera angle, every timestamp, every piece of mail was logged and uploaded to a secure cloud. Rebecca backed up our files to drives and a private server. We weren't just protecting ourselves anymore. We were building a case. Then Sunday came. A rusted gray SUV reversed onto our driveway, hard, fast, like it was claiming the ground. Out jumped 3 men. Tactical pants, utility belts, matching black polos with a logo I'd never seen before. Yes, an SB enforcement unit. They weren't just pretending anymore. They were acting like a paramilitary group. Tacones were tossed onto our concrete. A megaphone squealed to life. Attention, homeowners, this property is under active inspection by the East Summit Neighborhood Safety Board. Please remain inside your residence until the compliance assessment is complete. I stood frozen, hedge trimmers in one hand. Rebecca appeared behind the screen door, wiping her hands with a dish towel. Are they serious? She muttered, but her tone had already shifted. Steel wrapped and calm. The SUV doors opened in unison, and there he was again. Daniels, clipboard in hand, flanked by 2 new deputies who looked like they'd been recruited off Reddit threads about tactical roleplay. One of them had a walkie-talkie. The other wore a chest rig full of pens and what looked like was that pepper spray. I walked toward them slowly, phone in hand. Already recording? You're blocking my driveway, I said, keeping my voice steady. We have legal right to inspect non-compliant properties, Daniels declared, lifting his clipboard like it was a badge of divine authority. You violated 3 mandates: hedge height, improper trash bin storage, and unauthorized signage. Rebecca's tiny wooden welcome sign swung gently by the door. I bit back a laugh. There's no hoa here, I said. You're trespassing. That's when one of the deputies stepped forward. Double quote, sir. I'm going to need to see your ID. I blinked. For what? Failure to comply with community enforcement. His partner started filming with a phone. Subject appears agitated. He muttered into his mic. The cord wasn't even plugged in. Non-cooperative male, possibly armed. I glanced at the hedge trimmers in my hand, looked back at the camera. Really? Rebecca stepped outside, quiet as snowfall. She leaned against the railing, arms crossed, just watching. Daniel stepped forward, puffing his chest again. That's when she saw it. The badge. The emblem on it wasn't just generic. It was a low-resolution knockoff of the actual county sheriff's department design. Wrong number of star points. Reversed eagle. The font didn't even match. But this time, it wasn't just a pretend badge. They were impersonating her. Rebecca didn't move, didn't blink. Her eyes narrowed. But not in anger. In calculation. You boys always walk onto private property flashing that thing, she asked, her voice sweet, casual. Daniels raised his chin. This badge gives me authority in this neighborhood. Interesting. We'll let them talk. Let them keep digging the hole. They took pictures, measured the porch. One guy even tried to gauge the angle of the rain gutter with a protractor. Then they handed us another paper. A printed fine schedule stapled to a pamphlet titled Community Code Book. East Summit Edition. No author, no dates, no citations, just BOLD headers and threats. That night, we added every second of footage to the archive, labeled and time-stamped. Rebecca stared at the paused screen. Her reflection ghosted over Daniel's smug face. They tried to copy my badge, she whispered. That's not just trespassing anymore. That's second-degree felony under county statute. I looked at her. She wasn't angry. She was focused, like a surgeon with a scalpel. And I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't going to end with a warning. By week 2, the neighborhood felt different. It was subtle at first, nervous glances from across the street. Sprinklers turning off as we walked by. Curtains that used to stay open now drawn shut. People weren't just avoiding us. They were afraid, and we were starting to understand why. Because we weren't the first. An older couple down the block, Frank and Marlene, approached us one morning. Frank was jittery, fingers twitching around his mug of black coffee. Marlene looked pale, clutching a folder to her chest. We saw the guys at your house, she whispered. They came to us too. About a month ago. Frank nodded, swallowing hard. Said we owed $2,000 in restoration dues for our front fence. Said if we didn't pay, they'd put a lien on the house. Rebecca frowned. Did you pay? Frank's face crumpled. Double quotes. Yeah. We were scared. They had documents. A whole packet. They looked official. Marlene passed Rebecca the folder. Inside were scans of fake citations. Photos taken from odd angles, close-ups of bricks. A crooked mailbox. Weeds through concrete cracks. And one sign page that made Rebecca go still. A lien threat. Complete with forged county letterhead. Her lips tightened. That's a felony. And wire fraud. And harassment. And they said we couldn't tell anyone. Marlene interrupted. That if we did, they'd start compliance escalation. Rebecca looked at them both and said, quietly, you were extorted. They both nodded. Eyes glossy. We stayed at their table for over an hour. Asked questions, took pictures of the documents, logged everything. By the time we walked home, Rebecca's jaw was clenched. Her phone was already recording a voice memo. This is bigger than harassment. They've built a racketeering structure around intimidation. They use the illusion of authority and exploit legal fear. And nobody checks because nobody thinks they can fight back. I nodded. So we show them someone can. The next step was delicate. Reach out to others, slowly, quietly. And find out how far this went. We hosted a coffee meet on our lawn. No signs, just chairs, a folding table, some muffins. Open invite for families came. All of them had stories. All of them had been harassed. And all of them had paid to avoid confrontation. To keep their homes off some made-up compliance radar. They make you feel like criminals. One woman said, for a lawn, for a fence, for nothing. Rebecca nodded calmly. But I could see her rage simmering just under the surface. We built a spreadsheet. Name by name, violation by violation, total extorted. $28,350 in just 2 months. This wasn't some petty control game, thought it was organized fraud, run by people who believed no one would ever push back. But they made one mistake. They picked her. That night, Rebecca made the call, not to the sheriff's department, to a federal friend, one she hadn't spoken to in a year. "Monroe here," she said. "I've got something. Possible Title 18 violations. Domestic fraud. Impersonation of federal authority. I need quiet ears first. Then I'll go loud." I heard the voice on the other end ask one question. "Is it clean?" Rebecca answered. "I've got footage, docs, witnesses, and I'm being watched." There was a long pause, then just, "We're in." The next day, the up the pressure. Another visit. Another clipboard. This time, it wasn't Daniel's. It was a man we hadn't seen before. Tall, bald, tan tactical vest over a black tee, Oakley's, cargo pants. He didn't say a word, just approached slowly, like he was inspecting us, evaluating. Rebecca stood barefoot on the porch, calm as the sky before a storm. "Can I help you?" she asked. He stopped halfway up the walk. Didn't look at her, just said, "You don't belong here." Rebecca tilted her head. "Excuse me, you've stirred up the wrong kind of noise. We're a peaceful community. We like to keep things orderly, respectful." His voice was oily. To rehearse. Then he said something that froze the air. "Last time someone made trouble, their house caught fire." Silence. I stepped forward, but Rebecca held up one hand. Her eyes locked on him. And when she spoke, it was "Ice, are you?" threatening a sworn officer of the law. That made him pause, just for a second, just long enough. Rebecca stepped down. Calm, slow, she walked right up to him, pulled a wallet from her waistband, flipped it open. And held out a badge. A real one, gleaming silver, serial numbered. County-issued. Sheriff Rebecca Monroe, Fraud and Integrity Division. The man stepped back. His composure cracked for a fraction of a second. He looked at me, then at her. Rebecca leaned in slightly. "I know what you are. I know what you're doing. And I've already sent everything to 3 different federal servers." She gave a little smile. "If I disappear, you'll have 30 agents on your lawn before breakfast." He didn't respond, didn't blink. Just turned and walked back to his car. We watched him drive away. And for the first time since moving in, I saw fear on their faces. They didn't come back the next day. Or the day after. For 72 hours, our street felt normal. Dogs barking, kids spiking, no clipboards, no cones, no tactical vests. But it wasn't over, not even close. Because 2 things happened that week. Rebecca's contacts sent a secure link, a shared evidence board, password protected, where we could upload everything. It had a case number. That meant it was real now, official, in motion. Someone slipped a note under our door. It was handwritten, no name, just 7 words: "I want out." I didn't sign up for this. Rebecca stared at the paper, then looked up at me. "One of them's cracking." We didn't know which one, but the timing told us everything. That Saturday, Rebecca walked into the neighborhood diner at 6:45 a.m., alone. She took the booth in the back, sat facing the door, sipped black coffee. At exactly 7:01, he walked in, clipboard guy number 2, the one with the PROTRACTOR. Hair slicked back, nervous sweat at the collar. He sat across from her without a word, didn't order, didn't even look up. Rebecca leaned in. "You wrote the note." He nodded. "You were part of the crew that stepped onto my property, that issued a fraudulent fine, that wore an unauthorized insignia to intimidate civilians." He swallowed. "Yes." Rebecca's tone didn't change. "Why?" He exhaled, finally looking up. "It started as a side hustle. Daniels said it was legal, that it was just neighborhood standards enforcement, that people wanted the structure and the money." He hesitated. "I got 20% of every fee I logged, more if I helped enforce. I didn't ask questions." Rebecca leaned back. "You impersonated law enforcement?" He nodded slowly. "I didn't know you were real." She let that hang in the air. Then slid him a piece Have paper, write it down, everything, dates, names, payments, every house, every threat. He stared at it for a moment, then began to write. By noon, we had a 4-page confession, names, amounts, drop-off spots, burner numbers, even Daniel's office address. A rented storage unit 5 miles out of town. Inside that unit, he claimed, were records, fake fine templates, uniforms, a full printer setup. We forwarded everything to the case board. Rebecca redacted nothing. By 6 p.m., a federal response team had the location under surveillance, and Daniels had no idea. That night, things exploded. It started with tires screeching outside our house, then yelling. Daniels banging on our fence, pacing, screaming into his phone. He'd found out. We stayed inside, lights off, curtains drawn. Rebecca sat calmly at the kitchen table, recording audio. Daniels was losing control. His voice cracked. He shouted threats, legal ones, physical ones, some so well they barely made sense. Then he said it. I made this neighborhood. I made this system. I gave these sheep structure. And there it was, his delusion. He didn't see himself as a scammer. He saw himself as a savior. The sound of sirens finally made him flee. Rebecca didn't even flinch. The next day, clipboard guy number 2 disappeared, moved out, gone before sunrise, no note, no goodbye. But the dominoes had already started to fall. That Monday, we received a notice, an actual, real one, from the county attorney's office. It confirmed what we already knew. There was no legal record of any East Summit neighborhood safety board. But now, a formal investigation was underway. Rebecca stared at the letter for a long moment, then turned to me with that same glint in her eye. It's time to go louder. She made 3 moves that day. 1, she called every resident we documented, and a few we hadn't, told them what we'd uncovered, shared the link to the evidence board. 2, she gave a statement, not to the press, but to a local justice podcast with 200K listeners. She told the story, not as a sheriff, but as a neighbor, a wife. A woman pushed 1 inch too far. 3, she sent an email. To Daniels, just 7 words, you picked the wrong neighborhood to rule. And Daniels, he didn't reply. Not that day. But the next time he showed up, he didn't come to intimidate. He came with a gun and pointed it straight at her. But what he didn't know was that she wasn't just ready. She was waiting. It was just after 10 o'clock a.m. when he came back. No warning, no clipboard, just rage, and a gun. Daniels, same tacky sunglasses, same cheap cargo vest. But now there was no act. No HOA title. No paperwork. Just raw, desperate fear. His little empire was crumbling, and he needed someone to blame. And he chose her. I had just come back from the garage when I saw him standing on our porch, yelling Rebecca's name. But this time, he wasn't pacing. He was squared off, one hand twitching at his hip. I froze when I saw it, the glint of cold metal, tucked just under his jacket. Rebecca, he screamed, you think you're gonna tear down what I built? Rebecca stepped out of the front door like she'd been expecting him, calm, controlled. No fear in her eyes. None. Just that same still cord focus she used to wear before taking down fraud rings 3 times this size. Daniels, hinge shifted. The gun came out. He didn't point it at her yet, but it was in the open now, and his finger was on the trigger. Back off, Monroe, he snarled. I know people. I own this block. Rebecca didn't move, didn't even flinch. You're done, Daniels, she said quietly. This isn't a neighborhood. It's a crime scene. He raised the gun. Chest level. And time stopped. For one breathless second, the entire street went silent. You could hear the wind move through the trees. You could feel the tension like a noose being pulled tight. And then, drop it, now. 4 voices, in perfect sync. From both sides of the yard, they emerged. Federal agents, badges out, weapons drawn. Daniels spun, confused. And in that 1 second of hesitation, Rebecca moved. She didn't need to draw. She didn't need to shout. All she did was step forward and say, Put the gun down, or I will testify against you in a federal courtroom while your own crew turns state's witness. Daniels cracked out. His hand shook. He looked from her to the agents and back again. Then he dropped the gun. Right on the porch. Clatter. Silence. Collapse. He didn't resist. Not when they cuffed him. Not when they read the charges: wire fraud, impersonation, extortion, threats with a deadly weapon, conspiracy, and possibly racketeering. He was silent all the way to the car. But as they put him inside, he looked up at Rebecca one last time. You ruined everything, he said bitterly. She stared back and moved. You were never supposed to have power to begin with. The door slammed shut. And just like that, it was over. Or so we thought. Because systems like his don't run on one man alone. Daniels was the hammer. But hammers don't swing themselves. There were still files to uncover, fake fines to refund, and neighbors still too afraid to come outside. The case was just beginning, and Rebecca, she wasn't just a witness anymore. She was about to become the lead investigator on the biggest HOA corruption case this town had ever seen. Because when you try to weaponize fear but forget that justice has a name and a badge, you don't just lose your fake empire. You lose your freedom. Daniels was gone, arrested, detained, charged. But the silence he left behind was deafening. For 3 days, no one in the neighborhood opened their blinds. No one mowed their lawn. No one dared walk the sidewalks that had once been ruled by fake rules and real threats. Because even though the tyrant had fallen, the system that let him rise was still breathing. Rebecca knew it wasn't over. Daniels was just the face, the fist. But fists are told where to punch. And funded by hands you don't see. So she started digging. It began with the ledgers. Daniels had been meticulous. In his ego, he kept records. All of them. Over 300 fines, falsely issued. Dozens of names. Each entry was tagged with a number. Split 70 30ths. $1,400 G to driveway violation. $900 are for the codes weren't addresses. They were people. Accomplices. And each one had initials. Clipboard guy number 2. He was R4. But G2, the one led to something far bigger. A name Rebecca hadn't heard before. Jillian Cartwright, president of the county homeowners oversight board. A name so buried behind bureaucracy, most people didn't know the position existed. But she wasn't just complicit, she was profiting. Daniels funneled 30% of collected fines through a nonprofit she controlled. On paper, it funded community beautification. In reality, it was a personal slush fund, luxury spa retreats, golf memberships, a down payment on a second home. Ironically, outside any horror. Rebecca took it straight to the investigators, and this time, she didn't wait. She marched into the next county board meeting on record and laid out the receipts. Audio, documents, ledgers. She didn't need emotion. Just truth. Cold and clear. By the end of the meeting, Cartwright had resigned. 3 hours later, federal subpoenas hit 6 more board members tied to the scheme. But the fallout wasn't just political. It was personal. People who had stayed silent for years finally spoke. Mrs. Allison, 3 doors down, broke into tears telling Rebecca how Daniels threatened to have her relocated after her grandson parked crooked on the curb. The New Yans admitted they'd paid over $6,000 in fake violations just to avoid more visits. They thought it was legal. They thought they were the problem. Over the next week, Rebecca helped 42 neighbors file formal victim impact reports. Each one documented, signed, sealed, and added to the case file. And then came the trial. Daniels stood before the court, hands cuffed, eyes hollow. The swagger was gone. The clipboard replaced by a rap sheet. Rebecca testified on day 3. Her voice didn't tremble. She wore no uniform, no badge. Just a gray blouse and the calm wit of truth. My name is Rebecca Monroe. I'm a resident of East Summit. I'm a former federal sheriff. And I was targeted not for breaking any law, but because I refused to obey one man's delusion of power. And then she laid it all bare. The impersonation. The threats. The silent complicity of the board. The courtroom didn't move, not even one stop. By the end of week 2. Daniels had accepted a plea. He gave up everything, names, accounts, partners, and in exchange, he would serve 11 years in federal prison. Minimum. Jillian Cartwright. She was still under investigation. But the house of cards had collapsed, and East Summit, it was no longer under HOA control. The county declared the HOA dissolved. All residents were free of liens. All fraudulent fines nullified. Accounts closed. But the war wasn't over for Rebecca. Not yet. Because she had one more mission left, the final. Rot still hiding in the shadows. The companies that enabled it, the contractors, the lawyers, the banks that moved the money without asking questions. She wasn't just cleaning up a neighborhood anymore. She was about to expose a nationwide HOA fraud ring. And this time, she wasn't working alone. Because now, the victims had become witnesses, and the system had nowhere left to hide. By now, the streets of East Summit had started to heal. Lawns were overgrown. But no one cared. Flags flew again. Kids played. For the first time in years, people smiled in their own front yards. But Rebecca wasn't smiling, because the HOA was. Never the disease. It was just a symptom. The real corruption that was buried deeper, and she was ready to dig it out with both hands. Daniels had sung like a chore boy under pressure. Not out of guilt, but desperation. He gave up names. Bank accounts, even contracts. Turns out, the horror wasn't just scamming residents. They were part of a nationwide kickback loop. Fake maintenance companies, ghost law firms, shell compliance contractors all created to process made-up fines and skim a percentage from every transaction. Rebecca traced over $2.7 million in diverted funds, and it all led back to a holding firm called Prida Dynamics, headquartered out of Phoenix, but incorporated in the Cayman Islands. No website, no phone number. Just a name on the bottom of Daniel's last 5 ledgers. Prida Dynamics was a fraud laundering machine. Here's how it worked. The HOA issued fake fines. Payments were processed through Prida's shell maintenance branches. Those branches kicked 30% to regional boards. The rest vanished overseas. Rebecca brought it all to a contact at the Department of Justice's Real Estate Crimes Division. She didn't need a favor. She brought proof. Receipts. Wire logs. Signed contracts, some with Daniel's own handwriting. It was enough to open a federal investigation across 12 states. But she didn't stop there. She reached out to other neighborhoods. Other victims. HOA letters from California to Florida. All with identical stories. Fake citations, overzealous enforcement. And fines rooted to untraceable compliance affiliates. They all led back to the same 5 dummy corporations. All of them owned by Prida. Rebecca launched a national legal initiative with the DOJ's help and backing from a growing army of former HOA victims. She helped file a multi-state class action lawsuit against Prida and its executives. Depositions began within weeks. CEOs squirmed under oath. Emails surfaced. Internal memos calling fines predictable streams, and residents domesticated yield. One VP even wrote, "If Daniels gets sloppy, we cut him loose. Just send another clipboard." The judge's reaction, if proven true, this could be the largest coordinated property scam in modern U.S. history. But Rebecca didn't want headlines. She wanted just to stop for the veterans fined for flying their flags, for the widows threatened with liens over weed height, for every kid told they couldn't ride a bike on their own street. So when the class action was finally greenlit, she delivered one final message. This isn't about neighborhoods. It's about control. They weaponized fear and called it order. They taxed freedom and called it rules. That ends now. Prida's assets were frozen. Executives subpoenaed. By year's end. For major real estate hedge funds severed all ties. And the residents, they were getting their money back, every cent. But one thing still lingered, a single envelope, postmarked 2 days before Daniel's arrest. It was addressed to Rebecca, but had no return labeled. Inside, a flash drive. Encrypted. Labeled only. The list, when she decrypted it, What she found would shake everything. It wasn't just hoes. It was city councils. Title companies. Bank managers. And judges. All on payroll. All connected. And all about to be exposed. The flash drive was real, encrypted, hidden, buried behind layers of codes and dead ends. But once Rebecca decrypted it, the truth hit her like a freight train. 92 names, each one tied to the PRETA fraud web. Each one in a position of power. City clerks, code enforcement officers. Notaries. Bank auditors. Even to sitting judges. All on payroll. All paid to look the other way. The file structure was meticulous. Folders by city. Spreadsheets with TIMES. Photos of lunch meetings, wire transfers, even emails titled things like "Insure fine issued," "Are 3 families still resisting?" "Judge G signed," "Foreclosure clear," "Daniels needs legal backup if neighbor retaliates again." It wasn't just corruption. It was organized theft of American homes, and for every person on their list, Rebecca made a copy. One for the DOJ. One for her. One for the press. And then she made a decision. She wouldn't hide behind hearings. She'd walk it straight into the light. On a Thursday morning, Rebecca entered the local courthouse. She wore black. No badge, no weapons. Just a stack of files and a signed federal warrant. 2 marshals followed her. They walked past the front security, past the clerk's office, past the glass windows of Judge Geraldson's courtroom and right into chambers. "Judge Arnold Geraldson, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit real estate fraud, obstruction of justice, and accepting bribes to falsify judicial outcomes." The man didn't even look surprised, just whispered, "Who gave it to you?" Rebecca didn't answer. She didn't need to. That rest. It was domino number 1. By the end of the week, 6 government officials were indicted. 2 bank executives resigned. 1 PRETA board member turned state's witness, and a national task force was launched for real. A state corruption oversight headline screamed, "How a fraud ring topples as ex-sheriff blows the lid off nationwide scam." But Rebecca didn't smile. She'd spent too many nights listening to her neighbors cry. Too many days scrubbing the trauma from her own hands. East Summit had changed. No more HOA signs. The gates were still up, but now they stayed open. People painted their homes again. Kids rode freely. Flags flew tall. And on her lawn, the same porch chair sat in the shade. But now, it was never empty. Neighbors dropped by. Just to talk. To breathe. To exist without fear. As for Rebecca, she was offered a job. Not just by the DOJ, but by a coalition of community advocates across the country. They wanted her to lead the task force, to help protect neighborhoods from the very kind of tyranny she fought. And she said yes, not for vengeance. Not for power. But for the simple promise that no one would be fined for planting a garden again, that no veteran would be threatened for flying the flag they bled for, that no child would be told they couldn't play on their own sidewalk. The system had failed, but people like Rebecca rebuilt it from the ashes. And maybe that's the real story here. One woman. One fight, one neighborhood that changed the nation.